Good afternoon, Bermuda, and welcome to the first of two virtual town hall sessions on the Draft City of Hamilton Plan 2024 with the Department of Planning's Director, Victoria Cadero, Acting Senior Planner, Kenny Campbell, and Planner, Temden Doran. I now have the pleasure of introducing the Minister for the Cabinet Office, Vance Campbell, to open the session. Minister, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon for our first virtual town hall session following the release of the Draft City of Hamilton Plan 2024 on the 23rd of February. The release of this draft plan marks the second phase in our comprehensive plan-making process, building upon the groundwork laid with the release of the consultative draft in January of last year. This is the first time the Department of Planning has adopted a three-stage plan-making process with the overall intent of maximizing opportunities for the public to participate. And I'm pleased to say that this has been a very fruitful process thus far. The City of Hamilton holds a key role in the economic prosperity of our island, and it is therefore imperative to establish an ambitious land use plan that is not only acknowledging this, but also seeks to responsibly leverage the unique opportunities the city presents. I believe that a well-crafted plan should contain a judicious level of flexibility, enabling informed decisions whilst ensuring that pertinent factors are considered. And in my opinion, this plan does that. And it's particularly evident in the balanced way in which the document is applied in the decision-making process. I hope today's presentation is informative, and I encourage anyone who is interested to visit the Department of Planning's website for further details. That's planning.gov.bm. And I'll now hand it back over to Mr. Brangman so that he can introduce and get started with my colleagues from the Planning Department.
Thank you very much, Minister. I do understand you have another engagement, so I wish you a great day.
Okay, thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you. Before we begin the session, before we continue with the session, I want to remind the audience that during this presentation, you can feel free to submit your questions either in the Facebook comment section, or you can email askus@gov.bm. You will see that pop up on the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. And I now invite Vicky and her colleagues to begin, which will be followed by the Q&A session. Vicky, thank you very much.
Great, thanks for that. Good day, audience. We are pleased to be providing this session today. The purpose of the session essentially is to provide an update on the plan-making process for the city plan, an overview of some of the changes that have been made, and to also set out what happens next. As the minister just mentioned, we went through the consultative draft stage last year, and we hope everyone should by now have a clear understanding of the general direction of the plan. Given this, we're not intending on repeating items which were covered in much more detail during last year's presentations. We're now in the second and ultimately the final round of consultation, and we greatly appreciate everyone who's contributed to this process so far. We encourage anyone who wants to submit further comments as part of this exercise to visit our website for more information. And for quick reference again, that address is www.planning.gov.bm. I'm now going to hand over to Kenny Campbell, who is the project lead for this development plan.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So I'm going to take you through the first part of this presentation, and then my colleague Tamsin Duran is going to go through the second half. So this plan-making process, the exercise really commenced towards the end of 2021, which was when we started collecting data and analysing those findings to inform the policy stances, which would ultimately end up within the consultative draft plan. As the Minister said, the consultative draft was launched in January of last year, with consultation concluding in March. We did an extensive consultation exercise in support of that plan, in recognition that it was the first stage of the plan making process, and there were a lot of new ideas and concepts within that version of the document. So we wanted to try and get the message out there as much as possible. So we did a couple of town hall sessions similar to what we're doing today. We did various pop-up sessions at a number of locations throughout the city. We did a radio interview, press conference, as well as multiple targeted stakeholder presentations. So that involved presentations and question and answer sessions with groups such as agents, architects, the real estate sector, BEDC, the Chamber of Commerce, as well as, crucially, the Corporation of Hamilton, who have been an integral part of this plan-making process. Following the conclusion of the consultation exercise in March of last year, we have been in the process of considering all of the comments that we received as part of that exercise and determining how best to process the feedback that we received. Also, having that additional earlier stage in the process in the form of the consultative draft plan has provided us with a department with an opportunity to reflect more closely upon some of the policy stances set out within the plan and to discuss the mechanics of some of the policies and how they would work in practice internally. So it's been a useful exercise from that perspective as well. So the draft City of Hamilton plan, as the Minister said, it was launched on the 23rd of February, and the consultation period will run until the 26th of April. This is a legislated stage of the plan-making process, whereas the consultative draft stage was not. And having been through that consultative draft stage and considered all of the comments that we have received, we hope that the draft plan now provides a more solidified representation of policy direction. With that being said, the substantive content of the plan remains broadly similar to the consultative draft, but we have made a number of changes to the document, and all of those changes are set out within the accompanying city survey report. So just coming on to the city survey report itself, this is a very important document, and I would just strongly encourage anyone who is interested in the plan and is considering making further comments on the document to review the city survey report, because this is the document which in essence sets out our justification for the policy stances set out within the plan itself. So we first prepared the city survey report to accompany the consultative draft plan last year, and we have since updated that document in the form of an addendum. The purpose of preparing an update was really to update some of the data that was contained within the initial version of the city survey report and conduct the necessary analysis work. That has ensured that our policy stances set out within the plan continue to be fully informed and reflective of current circumstances. The city survey report now also includes within the addendum details of all the consultation submissions that we received as part of last year's consultation exercise, and it also documents the department's responses to each of the individual issues that were raised within those submissions. We want to ensure that we have a fully transparent plan-making process and that everyone who has contributed to the process is fully aware of how their comments have been considered by the department, whether those comments have resulted in changes to the plan, and if they haven't, the reasons why. So all of that information is set out within the city survey report. The city survey report also outlines all of the changes to the plan that have been made since the consultative draft version was issued last year, as well as a justification for the reasons why those changes have been implemented. So as the director said, the purpose of today's presentation is not really to replicate a lot of the topics that we went into a great deal of detail in last year's presentations, but I do want to touch on some key topics within the plan just as a bit of a refresher. So the first and most important aspect of the plan is how it is going to be used, because it represents a completely different approach to the way in which land use policies have traditionally been applied in Bermuda. The plan is to be applied as a whole, which means that when we receive a development proposal within the city. We'll identify all of the policies within the plan which are relevant to that particular proposal and conduct a balanced assessment in the round to see how the proposal sits against the plan as a whole. There will be particular emphasis upon ensuring that proposals align with the overarching objectives of the plan, which we have now embedded within an actual policy, whereas they weren't within policy within a consultative draft version, as well as the 6 strategic placemaking principles set out within the strategic section of the document. We hope or believe that this approach will enable us to reach reasonable, balanced and informed decisions. And a very critical aspect of this approach is that we would be moving away from those circumstances where a single policy mandates the refusal of an application which the department or the Development Applications Board deems to be acceptable on balance. What that will hopefully reduce is the circumstances where applicants are forced to go down the appeal route and have decisions overturned because of the way in which the plan has had to be applied previously. We know that the appeals process can lead to significant delays and it can have economic implications for projects. So hopefully the approach to the way in which this plan would be applied would be a way of addressing that. As you may recall, placemaking has been adopted as the overarching theme of the plan. And as I said, there are 6 placemaking principles set out within the placemaking policy in the strategic section of the plan. It's a broad policy concept, placemaking, but in essence, what it's really about is about trying to get developers to think beyond their own site and think about how they can actually make a positive contribution towards the existing character of the city and enhance the city's place qualities. Under the banner of placemaking, the plan promotes a design-led approach to development informed by contextual analysis. We know that the best designs are derived from a clear and evidenced understanding of the context of a site and how architects can respond appropriately to the established context. So that's part of where we're coming from under the banner of placemaking. And when I say design-led approach to development, this should always really be the starting point in deriving an appropriate form of development in any case, but in this case within the city. We understand that compromises will have to be made in order to deliver upon the needs of a client for a particular development, ensure that it's fit for purpose, but design should be the start of the process and should be the most important part of this. And we'll be requiring evidence of that on a more routine basis in the form of design statements, given the clear emphasis upon design quality set out within this plan. The plan contains an appendix which provides additional placemaking and design guidance, so that should provide a clearer indication of the sorts of issues the department will be looking at and analysing as part of the development proposals that we receive through the applications process. So a few other key topics. Uses. The ground floor of the area that we have termed the retail core continues to be protected principally for retailing, as is the case under the existing city plan and previous city plans as well. Complementary uses can be supported within that area, such as financial professional services, cafes, restaurants, and those types of uses. Basically, we're trying to ensure that that area is protected for the uses which generate the largest volume of footfall in order to create some vitality within that area in the hope that that would benefit existing businesses and get prospective businesses to move in to the city and view it as a viable location in which to establish themselves. Elsewhere within the city, the plan is fairly flexible and supports a range of uses which are complementary to the city's role as the island's principal commercial centre. A very important part of this document is the strong support for additional residential development within the city. There are a number of reasons as to why we believe this is a good idea, particularly from a sustainability perspective, because people living in the city, there is less need for them to commute across the island. But it also assists in providing an increased catchment for expenditure for existing city businesses. And again, linking back to that idea of if we have an increased footfall within the city, then prospective businesses will hopefully see this as a viable location, and we can start to see some of the vacancy rates addressed within the city, which have been popping up recently. In terms of parking, the plan provides support for strategic improvements to public parking facilities within the city in alignment with the corporation's intention to prepare a parking strategy for the city. And the need for on-site private parking facilities requires to be demonstrated, taking into account, amongst other issues, existing capacity within the surrounding area. Now, climate change is probably the most important topic for land use planning globally, not just within Bermuda, but it's important that it is a very integrated part of our land use plans from now on. So with that in mind, the plan contains a strategic climate change policy, which will ensure that the relevant factors are all taken into account where they're relevant to a particular development proposal. And in alignment with climate change principles, the plan also introduces a requirement for energy statements, which should evidence a conscious effort to minimise the energy needs of a development from the very outset of the process, and that will start with the design process. So I'm just going to hand over now to my colleague Tamsin, who's going to take you through.
Thanks, Kenny. Are you able to click forward for me? Thanks, Kenny. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So as Kenny mentioned, when we went through the consultative draft plan consultation process, we received a lot of feedback, and that was considered. As a result, we made a number of changes to the plan. So I'm going to go through a number of the key changes that we made. We received a lot of feedback whereby the public were acknowledging that we do have an aging population and that accessibility within the city is something that is it needs to be considered in all design proposals. The consultative draft did have a policy relating to accessibility, but when we took a look at it, we thought we needed to elevate its importance further. So we have added a specific objective, which speaks to universal design and accessibility. And then in the placemaking policy, we have also expanded upon that to touch on this at a higher level. We had a comment associated with the waterfront provision. So you would know that the waterfront is one of the strategic development sites. We have 4 that we've recognized within the city. We received a comment essentially saying that they recommended that we recognize the existing use of the waterfront as an active port for cruise ships and other visiting vessels, and then that use should continue. So we agreed with that comment fully, and we have revised the policy to reflect that accordingly. The consultative draft did speak, as Kenny has mentioned, about encouraging a wide and diverse range of uses across the city, but some of the feedback that we got suggested that maybe the intention of that policy wasn't being fully understood. So we went and we sort of revised that policy, made sure that we were not discounting any uses which could contribute towards the vitality of the city. We received some feedback with regards to ensuring that cultural heritage was recognized in development proposals that were put forth. We do have a historic areas section, which is fully dedicated in the plan to listed buildings and historic areas, but we decided under the overarching placemaking policy that we would highlight cultural heritage a little bit more than we had in the consultative draft. So we've added that. As I mentioned before, we have 4 strategic development sites which were recognized under the consultative draft. That was the City Hall Car Park, the Parleville Car Park, the waterfront, and also the former Canadian Hotel site. We did receive a request to consider adding a vacant piece of land at the intersection of Joel's Alley and Church Street, which we took a look at. We also contacted the owner of that property, who was fully in support of it being promoted as a strategic development site. And upon review, we do think that if developed appropriately, it could have the ability to really vitalize that area and contribute in a very positive way to that part of the city. We got a lot of feedback about street trees, which, while we recognize that they generally do fall under the mandate and the remit of the Corporation of Hamilton, new developments can potentially have an impact on them. So we acknowledge that, and we've added a new policy to ensure that street trees are protected. And then finally, the other big change is to do with the subdivision policy. We went back and took another look at it and just refined it a little bit, made sure that the tests in assessing a proposed subdivision application were meaningful, and we revised that accordingly. Can you click to the next slide for me? Thank you. So what happens next? So as Kenny's mentioned, we're right now under a public consultation period, which will end on the 26th of April. All objections and representations which are submitted during that time will be reviewed by the department. Essentially, if the department is unable to come to a resolution with an objector, there will be the opportunity for the objection to be presented at a tribunal. The tribunal will then prepare a report with its recommendations, which will then be presented to the minister for consideration. And then the minister will consider all of the recommendations and make his decision. A final tribunal report. Oh, could you click back for me? Thanks. A final tribunal report will then be prepared, and the plan will be finalized and then pursue its adoption through the legislator. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how do you submit comments? All right. Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to go to our website, planning.gov.bm. You'll see a pretty little picture of our front cover of the Draft City of Hamilton Plan. And if you click on that, it's going to take you to our Draft City of Hamilton Plan webpage. If you scroll down to the bottom of that webpage, there is a section on how you can submit comments. We'd like them to be submitted through our customer self-service portal. The first thing you have to do is register an account before you can submit your comments. So I've sort of included a little screenshot there of what the customer self-service portal looks like. The dark blue button is where you're going to register yourself and get an account. Once you've done that, then you're going to go into the home page. You're going to click on the Draft City of Hamilton Plan button, and then we've tried to provide some pretty useful screen instructions to sort of talk you through the submission process. Next plan. Can you click to the next slide? Thank you. In terms of the timeline, so the top line, the 4 boxes on the top row have all been completed to date. We are now in the February to April 2024 box, which I've circled there. So essentially, we've just issued the draft plan and we're conducting the legislative consultation process or phase. After that, we will take a look at the objections and representations that are submitted, and we will prepare departmental position reports. Obviously, those objections where resolutions cannot be made will be presented to a tribunal, which we're hoping to do in August, September time. And then in October, November of this year, we'll prepare a tribunal report, which will be presented to the minister, and he will make his final decisions. And our hope is that by the end of the year, the plan is adopted and has become an operative document. And last slide, please. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and hear our presentation today. Again, please visit planning.gov.bm in order to find out more information about the plan, in order to find out how you can submit your comments. Alternatively, you can also email us at cityplan@gov.bm if you have any questions. And just remember that the deadline for feedback is the 26th of April. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you all for that very thorough and informative presentation on the Draft City of Hamilton Plan 2024. So we will now enter the question and answer part of this session. As a reminder, this is an opportunity for the audience to ask any questions about the plan, and I encourage everyone to submit their questions either in the Facebook comment section or by emailing askus@gov.bm. Again, that information is on the screen there for you. So we have had some questions submitted during the presentation, and I'll begin with them now. So the first question we have is, what is the difference between the consultative draft plan and the draft plan?
All right, I'll
Who
take
wants to
that
take
one.
that?
Do you want
Okay,
to
thank
take
you,
that,
Kenny.
Kenny?
As I kind of touched on, I'll take that. Sorry. As I touched on during my presentation, that the idea behind the consultative draft was really to create a further opportunity within the process to maximise public input and stakeholder input into the plan making process. And again, another part of it was to try and resolve any issues at an earlier stage in the process than has previously been done. So that by the time we get to the draft plan stage, which is the stage we're now at, we can have ironed out any issues, and it makes for a more smoother passage towards the adoption of the plan. So the consultative draft was not a legislated stage of the process. The draft plan is a legislated stage of the process. So that's the most significant difference between the two documents. And as I said during my presentation, having that stage has allowed us to refine the plan slightly in response to public feedback, and hopefully, as I said, will allow for smoother progression towards the adoption of the document.
Okay, sounds good. Anything further to add from anyone? All right. So going on to the next question. It reads, did you receive a lot of feedback through the consultative draft period? Sorry, through the consultative draft plan consultation period?
Yeah, I can take that, Kenny. Yeah, so we got a total of 19 respondents who provided written feedback through the consultative draft consultation phase. We knew going into this, just from past experience, that sometimes people are more willing to communicate their thoughts on a bit of an informal basis as opposed to writing formal submissions. So knowing that, we really did take a lot of extensive notes when we were doing stakeholder presentations and other sort of pop-up events and sort of public town hall meetings, so that we really, could sort of understand all of the thoughts and all of the kind of issues out there. And all of that is reflected in the City Survey Report 2024. So if you go to that document at the back in the addendum, we provided tables that outline all of the comments that we received, whether they were sort of informally through these discussions or whether they were formally submitted. And they also include the department's response. So I would definitely suggest, if you're interested in terms of the feedback that we did get, to go and take a look at that document. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Tamsin, for that. The next question that we have here, will the draft plan be an operative plan?
I'll take that one. No, well, it's an easy answer. It's not an operative plan, but that does break with tradition in Bermuda, because draft plans have normally been issued as operative documents. The consultative draft was not operative. This version won't be operative, and we want to ensure that we go through the entire consultation exercise and that we've had a robust and comprehensive process, and everyone has had an opportunity to comment on a complete document before we actually have an operative plan in place. And that will require going through the full legislature process as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Kenny. So, and again, the public, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions about the plan. You can submit it in the Facebook comment section, or you can email them to askus@gov.bm. So the next question we have sent in by email is, will residential units be allowed on all floors within the city?
I can take that one. So the plan does support residential development above the ground floor level throughout the city, with the exception of the Canal District. The Canal District is sort of generally the northwestern corner of the city. And that part of the city, in our review and sort of surveying the area, is generally or partially characterized by traditional residential properties that do have ground floor walkout, residential ground floor walkout. So that is why that part of the city we would support, or the plan is written in a way to support residential uses at the ground floor level. Outside of the Canal District, in all other parts of the city plan area, the plan supports residential uses above the ground floor level. And the reason for that is because residential uses tend not to generate high levels of footfall throughout the business day, and therefore it can make minimal contribution towards the vitality of commercial centers. So in the commercial center, the retail core, and some of the other districts, we really want high level footfall in those areas to generate a lot of activity during the business hours. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tamsin. And the next question that we have here is, how about on-site parking? Will that be allowed for residential units?
Yeah, I can take that again. So within the retail core, no on-site parking will be permitted. And this is a stance that's been carried over from the existing City of Hamilton Plan 2015. However, outside of the retail core, on-site parking is required to be provided. However, the board has discretion to waive that in some circumstances, like, for example, adaptive use of buildings, which may not have the space to provide on-site parking. Essentially, one reason that we chose to do that was we didn't want to displace parking onto the Corporation of Hamilton. So if you have a residential unit outside of the retail core, we are expecting that you provide for parking on site.
That makes sense. So we're starting to get a bit more activity on our emails, a few things coming in. So another question that we have is, what is the Department of Planning seeing in terms of planning applications being submitted currently? Can you touch on something regarding the increase of residential developments?
Yeah, sure. There's certainly been an increase recently in planning applications, and we're very, very encouraged to see that some of that has been in the form of additional residential development, which we know we need. The city really presents an excellent and unique opportunity in a Bermudian context for additional residential development. Outside of the city, the Bermuda plan is quite strict in terms of the density of development that you could achieve. The city presents a completely different opportunity, particularly in terms of density. And as I said, additional residential development in the city makes sense for a multitude of reasons, including particularly from a sustainability perspective. It really has the capacity to absorb a significant amount of additional residential development, dense residential development, which would clearly provide some much needed additional accommodation.
Okay, thank you for that, Kenny. So another one that we have just received is, what does retail look like in the future, given online shopping is kind of beginning to be front and forefront for many businesses these days? Will they be replacing brick and mortar stores more?
Yeah, I'll try and answer that one. This is something that we thought about very carefully, and it was something that came through in our analysis work as we were looking at other jurisdictions right at the start of this process. We know that there's been a general decline in brick and mortar retailing globally, really, for 25 years. In other jurisdictions, they have issues such as out-of-centre shopping, but in Bermuda, it's really the online shopping that's had and continues to have a significant impact upon in-person retailing. One way of addressing that is really the sort of placemaking approach that we're trying to take with the city plan. So if you can turn this an urban area, into a place which is an appealing place to be in and of itself, and not just necessarily because people need to visit it to access the services and facilities that those areas contains, then it can have knock-on benefits for existing retail. And as I said during my presentation, hopefully that would encourage prospective businesses to establish retail stores within the city itself. But there's also has to be a recognition that that can only go so far. And I think there is a real need for cities across the world really to diversify themselves and rethink fundamentally what they want to be in the long term. And I think a large part of that will be a need to introduce leisure facilities, recreation facilities, more cultural uses, that sort of thing. So I think that those types of uses would be fantastic for the city. Again, that would link into placemaking aspirations, and people would have different reasons for visiting the city, which would be a positive for the vitality and viability of the city overall.
Yeah, that was a great answer, Kenny. So that is the last question that we've received thus far. Is there anything further that the team at Department of Planning wish to add?
I'll just, if there's no more questions at the moment, Michael, no?
No, not at the moment, but definitely encouraging the audience to send in any further ones they may have.
Yeah, so something I think is worth talking about in a little bit more detail, because it came up as part of the informal dialogue that we had through the consultation exercise last year, was building heights within the city.
Yes.
I think there was perhaps a little bit a misunderstanding in the message that we were trying to give out with this plan. So as I said during my presentation, the starting point in deriving an appropriate development and design within the city should be to undertake a high quality contextual analysis of the surrounding area and really determining what would be an appropriate architectural response taking into account the existing circumstances of a site. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to mimic what's in the surrounding area. It just means that you have to come up with an intelligent architectural response in terms of scale, massing, building height. You would also be looking at opportunities to enhance connections and capitalise upon any opportunities for enhanced views within the city as well. So the issue of height is not mandated by the plan. It's not the way in which the existing plan limits story heights, but it should be clearly acknowledged that context is the most important thing in deriving building height, amongst other issues as well. And that's the message that we're trying to give out with this plan. And like I said, the plan does contain additional more detailed guidance in the form of an appendix, which gives a clear indication, as I said, of the types of issues that we would be taking into account in determining applications within the city, and provides a bit more steer in terms of building heights as well.
Okay, great. So we don't have any more questions coming in at the moment. So Kenny, thank you for that. Is there anything else the rest of the team wish to share before we close the session? Okay. Well, I just want to remind the audience, and first, thank you all for joining us here today. The next session will be held on Thursday, the 11th of April, from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. So I encourage those that join us today to come back tomorrow, and we'd love to have more viewers as well come and share their questions with us so that the team at the Department of Planning can answer them. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and that is the end of this session. Department of Planning team, thank you again. Everyone, Bermuda, have a great day. Bye-bye.